not fear death. And many of you guys may wonder why would I make such a video. However, I feel that this video is something that needs to be addressed because of the fear of death is something that robs us of the present, the here and now, the one most precious life that we have. We are wasting it because we are afraid to die. And the reason we have this fear of death is usually because of some type of belief, some type of religious belief. Someone told us this would happen, that would happen, and usually it's some type of fear tactic. Wow, look at this, guys. Check this out. I don't know if you guys can see this big thing, this big fish or something, I don't know. Wow, I don't know what it is. It's kind of, anyhow, I just missed it. Anyhow, it's over that way now. Some big shark looking thing. But anyhow, back to what I was saying. So the fear of death is something that robs us of the present. The only moment that exists, the only moment that is precious to us is the now. However, because of this fear of death, we tend to not live our life to the fullest because we have all of these beliefs again, thinking that there will be some type of eternal damnation or some type of punishment that we only believe. And again, for most of you guys who have seen any of my videos, by now, I think you know that I do not believe in believing. So with that being said, the number one culprit, if I may say, that promotes this fear is religion. Religion tells us that if we do not do what we need to do in reference to being moral individuals, if we do not have a particular belief, then we are most likely to spend some type of time in eternity being punished for something that we did in this lifetime. However, speaking from an existentialist perspective, I am here to say that we were born initially, we were free from all beliefs at birth. We did not have any political views, any religious affiliations, anything of that sort when we originally came into the world. However, as time went on, our environment, our culture, our relationships with our friends, our family, and our community, those things actually affected us in such a way that we believe the things that we were told to believe, not knowing if they were true or not. That is why, from an existentialist perspective, we would say that the being self is the true nature that is priority, and in principle, what comes first before our beliefs. Beliefs are something that happens as time goes on, again, as we become older, as these things, individuals come and go into our lives, our perspective on life also changes as well. So before I go any further, I'd just like to do a very quick recap. Like I said earlier, that our beliefs, what we believe to be true, some of the things that we believe to be true, we actually have no evidence. However, we were told that this is what we should be afraid of. We should fear death. We should fear this. We should fear that. And we absolutely have no reason, because we have no evidence to support the majority of our beliefs. That is why they are called beliefs, and that's why I said I do not believe in believing. So again, like I said, also, when we were born, literally from birth, we were born with a blank slate. We had no belief systems. We didn't believe, we didn't have any political beliefs in any particular groups. We didn't have any ideologies. We didn't have any beliefs about culture, anything of the sort. We came into this world with a blank slate, and as we grew older over time,
Those beliefs were influenced from our outside in society, environment, and so forth and so on. And so death was also something that came up in discussions through many religious uh, organizations, if I may say, and a lot of this fear was put into us, and so that fear of death, many of us go through life worrying about death, and we tend to actually, because of this fear, because of this worry, it tends to rob us of our present day life. We tend to be concerned about, we tend to be worried about life. We tend to lose we tend to overlook the fact that we are alive, however, because we are so afraid of death. And so that is what I'm saying, that once we overcome this fear, we would no longer necessarily be able to be robbed our lives. Some of our lives will actually, for the first time, we will actually start to live our lives for the first time, because most of the time we actually were in some fear of death, thinking that death is right around the corner, right around the bend. And so, again, with that fear eliminated, life actually starts to blossom and things start to actually become a lot more enjoyable. Unless you're actually sick, maybe unless you're sick and you have some terminal disease and you have X amount of years to live, then that's a different problem. That's a different situation. I could understand the fear of death. However, most of us who are perfectly healthy, there's nothing wrong with us. In many cases, we tend to worry and we tend to be afraid of death, not even knowing what to expect or what is going to happen. But again, that fear is with us all throughout of our lives, robbing us secretly in the dark. So I cannot stress that enough, how serious this issue is and how important it is for us to try to overcome this obstacle called death, at least the fear of death, if I may say.
But what I'm here to talk about today also is why it is important that we get a full understanding of how important it is to get a grasp on this belief or this perceived notion of death, because it literally robs us of our innate freedom, of freedom to be who we were naturally designed to be, free agents, not objects of uh, incarceration, if I may say. So we were meant to be free agents, but because of our beliefs and things that we are not aware to be true, such as death, heaven, and hell, things of that sort, we tend to give up our freedom and we tend to opt in for a bondage type of life, believing things that we have absolutely no evidence of to be true at all. So again, speaking from an existentialist perspective, I am more concerned with the idea of being in bondage when there is no such thing as being in bondage. And this bondage that I'm talking about comes from not knowing who and what you are. Because again, the fear of death solely arises from not knowing who and what you are. Because
So, again, like I said earlier, the previous video that I covered, the previous live stream that I covered, was talking about knowing who you are. First and foremost, we need to understand who we are at the core before we try to do anything. There was a story, the Buddhist is a Buddhist story. There was a gentleman who was shot with an arrow, and that gentleman was shot. And then what happened was someone came to help that gentleman. A doctor or some aide came to help that gentleman, and the gentleman, rather than receive the help, what the gentleman did was he was more concerned about where the arrow came from, who shot the arrow, which direction, what type of metal was on the tip of the arrow, what material was the stem of the arrow made of, he was so concerned about all of these superficial subject matters. He literally ignored the fact that he got shot by an arrow and he was literally dying. And so the moral of that story was, from the Buddhist perspective, is that we tend to worry about some of the things that are not so much as crucial as the present moment. We tend to fear all of these different things that we have no control over. We have no control over death. We have no control over, as far as we know, to some degree, for the most part, we have no control over, what really is going to happen per se. Yes, we have all of these different philosophical ideas and different concepts and different beliefs in heaven and hell and samsara and so forth and so forth and so on. And again, nothing to degrade any of these belief systems. I'm simply saying, factually speaking, we have very little next to no evidence of this at all per se. Again, yes, we have methods and so forth, but I'm not here to go into all of that. All I'm simply saying is the story, the moral of that Buddhist story about the guy who got shot with the arrow, who literally simply was dying, but he was so concerned about all of these other factors that was somewhat trivial to the fact that he got shot with the arrow. He was losing blood. He was about to die, but he was thinking about all of these things. So again, so the moral of that story is, again, is that we, rather than focus on our present life, the life that we have now, focus on the things that we should be caring about today. We tend to focus on things such as afterlife and things that we have really no actual control over per se. And that was the moral of that Buddha story. Again, pay more attention to the present moment, because if we don't pay attention to the present moment, we will rob ourselves blindly, again, in fear, to something that we don't even know the truth to be a fact.
Because if you were to do self inquiry, if you were to do self evaluation at the deeper level, at the core level of who you are, you would understand that the awareness, the isness, the consciousness that you are, it is impossible for that thing to die. Yes, there might be, the object may die, the object may dissolve and go away, the mind may dissipate. However, the awareness itself is something that is eternal. And for example, to prove my point, I don't know how old many of you guys are watching this video, but let's say you're 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever how old you are, do you feel like you came into existence on your birthday, or do you feel like you always existed? Now you have to trust your awareness, and I'm not asking you to go off what your mind says, but feel within yourself. Your awareness, your consciousness will tell you the answer. And most of us will say, you know what, I feel like I always had existed. I feel like I didn't just exist, started to come into existence one particular day. It feels like I always existed. So that is what I'm talking about here today. That thing that always existed, that beingness, that awareness, that thing called life itself. So in order for life to die, it would be somewhat, like, I don't know, like the water behind me, saying that the water behind me could become dry. Water in itself is an eccentric nature, or essence is wetness. Life itself is eccentric nature is life itself. There is
So, so this type of information, again, is based on non-duality. If you guys are just simply used to traditional duality concepts, this information may come off a little strange to most of you guys. However, the non-dualist perspective is not looking at the self as the body. Most of us relate ourselves, our identity, to the object, the physical body. I am a male. I am this height. I am this weight. We tend to identify with titles. I am a doctor. I am a carpenter. I am a barber. I am a beautician. I am a gardener. We tend to identify with all of these objective things, thinking that we are these things. However, through self-evaluation, self-introspection, meditation, things of the sort, We go into great self realization, realizing that we are not any of these things. And so, therefore, when we come to the conclusion that we are the awareness, the consciousness itself, we will come to realize that this consciousness, this awareness, did not necessarily originate with us from birth. Like I said, if you ask yourself a simple question, if you simply ask yourself, I don't, however old many of you may be who may be watching, if you may be, let's say, for example, you might be whatever, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old. If you literally ask yourself this question and you're honest with yourself, like I said, if you're 20, 30, 40, whatever years, ask yourself, do I feel like I came into existence on my birthday? Do I feel like I came here on that date, or do I feel like I always existed? And if you ask yourself this question honestly, and you take a little second or two to actually wait for the answer, your consciousness, your awareness will answer for you. 99% of the time, all of us will say we don't feel like we ever came into the world, like our life really started at our birth date. 99.999% of us will say, you know what, for some strange reason, I feel like I was always here. I don't remember coming into existence on my birthday, because if that was a fact, I think by now at least one person would feel that. But however, no human being was able to actually feel that experience at all. Majority, 99% of people would say, hey, you know what? I don't remember ever feeling like I came into existence on my birthday. I feel like I have always existed. So if you ask 10 million people this question, and 10 million people say, hey, I feel like I always existed no matter what, that should speak for itself. Maybe there is something to this consciousness, this awareness always being have existed. And so therefore, if you always feel or felt like you always have existed, it's a strong possibility. If you always felt that way, it's a strong possibility that this consciousness, this awareness always existed. And if again, from a non-dualist perspective, if you are the consciousness, of you are the awareness, then it is fair to say, theoretically, in theory, to say that you were never born, and theoretically, you will never die as well. So theoretically, that is the concept about consciousness as well.
There is no death in life. However, there's a process in life called birth and death, but life itself is cannot die. It's like the sun. The sun's job is to shine, and that is the job of the sun. And the sun does not need anyone to make it shine or help it shine. It just does what it does. Life is the same thing. Life is just life, and life, only thing life knows how to do is live. So with that being said, when we go and do this self inquiry, just remember, go back and watch my video, Who Am I? That video also goes into detail about the methods, if I may say, the three methods, fundamental principles to ask yourself when you want to find out something, whether something is aware or not. So today we're talking about death. So for example, you ask yourself from an awareness perspective, does death change? Death.
One second before I get into this, because again, all of this information is very deep, esoteric information. This is not, superficial entertainment information. However, most individuals again get life and death confused. If you ask the average person what is the opposite of life, 99.9999% of the people will say the opposite of life is death. And that is incorrect. From an esoteric perspective, the opposite of life is birth. Many individuals, if they are asked again, what is the opposite of life, the majority of people will answer death. But again, from a non-dualistic perspective, the opposite of life is not death. The opposite of life is birth. However, death is the cycle itself of birth and death. So that is what people tend to get confused. The opposite of life is not death. Life is the cycle that contains life and birth, which continuously goes from life to death. And according to the Hermetic principles, the law of polarity, there cannot only be positive without negative. There cannot just be up without down. There cannot be left without right. So therefore, there cannot just be death without life. So therefore, if you're alive, technically, theoretically, from on a hermetic principle, if you die, if there's death, then you can't stay dead according to the hermetic principle. Then the cycle of life should bring about birth. Again, very complex, deep subject matter, but I'm gonna let the video go on. So you guys just continue watching and absorb some of
Changes.
the information.
Yes. One minute there's death, next minute there's life, but the awareness does not change. So therefore, death is not the fundamental thing of who you are. You do not die. The awareness does not, the awareness itself does not change. The death change. So therefore, you are not the death. And then we look at the second concept when we want to find out something, if something is the principle or fundamental.
So this just to make it a lot clearer. So there are three principles that if we want to find out something, if something is fundamental, if something is not fundamental or non-fundamental, we must ask, does the thing change? One of the three pillars to find out if anything is fundamental at the core, one of the principle is, does this thing change? And so when we look at death, we see that yes, there's death and then there's life. So death itself cannot be fundamental because it always changes. So if something is fundamental, meaning that it does not change. And so consciousness would be an example of that, that something does not change. The I-ness, the isness, the beingness of who you are always is the same. That stays the same no matter what. You are the same I when you were 2 years old, when you became 5 years old, when you became 20, 30, 40, 50, however old you may be. Your body may have changed, your mind may have changed, your emotions may have changed. You may have gotten taller, put on some weight, lost weight, grew some hair, lost some hair. You know, different things may have changed with the body physically, but the consciousness of the I-ness that has always remained the same. So the fundamental identity of the person is the I-ness, the I amness, the isness, the awareness, the consciousness of that person. That is the only thing remains the same throughout the years. When you were 2, you were saying, I want this. When you were 5, you were saying, I want that. When you were 30, I. The I never changes. And so one of the principle, again, fundamental principle, to find out if something is principle or not, does the thing change? And so death changes, and that also would say death is not fundamental as well.
Aspect in life, we look at death from the awareness perspective. Are you aware of death? So you are aware of death. So the awareness is the subject and the death is the object. So from the awareness, from the object and subject perspective, the death is the object that's being aware of. So the awareness is the subject and the death is the object. Just like the eyes are the object and the thing seen are the eyes are the subject and the thing seen are the object. So in this particular case, the death itself is also the object, and the subject, the unchanging thing, is the awareness of this death. So far we have principle 1, the death changes, the awareness does not change. Therefore, death, you are not the death. Principle 2, you are aware of the death is the object, and you are the subject. And then we have principle 3.
So briefly, so again, there are 3 principles when we want to find out. Again, we're speaking esoterically now. We're not talking about traditional going on Google or anything of the sort. This information is pure esoteric, spiritual knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So again, like I said, when we want to find something out at the core, is this thing the fundamental principle? We first have to ask, does the thing change? If the thing changes, it is not fundamental. So, do we live at some point and do we die? Yes, so death is not fundamental because it changes. One minute we're alive, the next minute we're dead. So, death is not fundamental. So, the next fundamental principle that we have to look at is again, all of this is esoteric information, spiritual, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikhism type of top subject matters. We have to look at the information, look at the thing that we're questioning from a subject and object perspective. Is the thing the subject, or is the thing that we are looking at that's an inquiry, is it the object? So therefore, for example, when we look at this an awareness perspective, we have to say, when we look at death, is death aware of awareness, or is awareness aware of death? Are you aware of death, or is death aware of you? And so we're looking at ourselves from an awareness perspective, from a consciousness perspective. We are looking at yourself again, trying to understand this philosophical idea, the difference between death and consciousness, objects and subjects. So again, the object would be death, and the subject would be the object would be death, and the subject would be consciousness. So is death aware of you, or is your consciousness aware of death? So once again, the consciousness does not change, and then which makes it more fundamental. And then again, the consciousness is aware of the death. Therefore, pillar number 2 states that consciousness is also fundamental as well. Very, very powerful, deep, deep subject matter complex. Again, like I said, most individuals are not, they don't really go this deep into stuff. But again, that is what I do, and that is what I teach. So again, this channel, again, I cannot stress this enough. If you are a shallow, superficial, dogmatic person, and you pretty much believe you have all the answers, and you believe you know everything, this channel is not for you. But however, if you are a person that you have more sort of an open mind, and you're willing to expand the mind, you're willing to question some things, so you're willing to question your beliefs, and you're willing to go down the rabbit hole, in the sake of the namesake of knowledge, this video is going to be for you. So again, the two fundamental principles. Fundamental principle number 1, death changes is not fundamental. Principle number 2, death is not aware of you, you are aware of death, so therefore consciousness is more fundamental than death itself. So we're going to go into fundamental 3 and see what it has to say about death as well.
Is the death sentient or unsentient? Basically, are you aware of death, or is death aware of you? So those would be the 3 principles. And please go back and watch my video, Who Am I? That video is going to go into a lot greater detail and tell you guys about who am I. That video is going to answer a lot of these questions as well. So if you go back and watch that video is going to give you guys a much clearer detail about this subject object principle, what I'm talking about, and that's going to help you to come to an understanding of who you are as well. Also, if you go and you can check out video What is Love, that video also goes into much greater detail. Then you could go and check out the video. There's a few other videos that actually complements this video as well. So check those videos out. Those videos are going to be in reference to death as well, knowing who you are as the fundamental self, the consciousness, the pure awareness. That is what we're talking about here today. So back to what I was saying. So when we go back and we look at, from a religious perspective, we look at the religions and all the religions of the world today. In most cases, Western religions have some type of concept of there being an eternal damnation or hell or heaven or something of that sort. And when we look at those religions, we basically have, these are all beliefs that what may happen, what may not happen. However, there is no real factual evidence per se of this eternal damnation or this eternal reward, if I may put it that way. However, the Buddhists, they do have some concept of hell, and that concept is also temporal. That is not a real, that's not a real permanent hell, but that is temporal. And so the Buddhists itself have some type of concept of there being hell, but that's a different topic for another day. However, what I'm talking about here today is more of a Western uh, Abrahamic religious perspective, talking about this eternal damnation, this thing, this place that we go, and we're going to be tortured, and we're going to have all of these negative things happen to us. However, that concept is the real root cause of our suffering, believing in the fear of this death, thinking that we will be punished in some way, some shape or form, and that is why we have this fear of this initial fear of death because of our religious beliefs. And if we were to remove those religious beliefs, we would tend to actually come to some place of freedom. And that's what I am talking about here today, achieving freedom, freedom from bondage of all different beliefs, hatred, greed, lust, desires, all of these things that tend to keep us in bondage. However, one of the main, number one, reasons for this bondage and this fear of death is religion. And that religion is what I am trying to clarify today as being a root cause also of this fear or this misunderstanding of death as well. So again, if we look back at and if we look at this death perspective, we will see that in life we are given a few examples so that we could not really be so afraid of death. One example would be when before we were born.
So just a quick recap. So again, from speaking from historically, 99.999% of our fear of death came from religion. If there was no religious talk of death ever, majority of us would never be ever afraid of death. However, individuals knew that if we could keep some people afraid, we would have more control. So therefore, the masses are kept under control morally, not because they really want to do good things. In most cases, most people really do good things because they fear going to jail. They don't really do things because they're really just so morally correct. They just don't want to go to jail in most cases. So the same thing would apply as well. Majority of us, we don't really necessarily, or we're not just the most moral goody two shoe citizens. We just fear punishment. There's something in psychology called reward and punishment. And so the same thing applies to death as well. If from a religious perspective, we were told that if we do good, we will get some type of eternal reward and we will go to heaven. And then we were also told if we do bad, then we will also get some type of eternal damnation. And so the punishment sounds far greater than the reward, because the reward sounds good. Yes, we're going to have all of these according to what the people say, the scriptures say, we're going to have this and walk on streets of gold and and all of this other stuff. It sounds good, drinking milk and honey and all of that, and wouldn't be any pain and suffering. That sounds good. But actually, when we are alive, we do have some good times. We do have some good moments. We do have moments of a lack of pain and suffering. We do have moments of joy and happiness, and we do have moments of feeling good. We could actually relate to that. So we actually feel good at times. It might be not all the time, but most of us could relate to times when we were feeling good. But the majority of us cannot fathom eternal punishment and damnation. The 99% of us cannot even fathom what eternity even means. Most of us can't even count to a million. Most of us can't even count to a few 100,000. So imagine eternity. So that eternal fear was being instilled in us from a long time ago, from a child, going to Sunday school, going to church, hearing from our peers, hearing from our family, our members, our elders in the community, this fear of death, because we fear punishment. There are some cultures actually in the world, Some of us may call those cultures primitive. They still hunt and they do hunt and gathering and all that stuff. They still hunt. They don't have any electronics. They don't have any TV. They don't have any video, DVD. They don't have any of that shit. None of that. But however, they believe that every day they get up, they try to hunt, they try to survive, and that's how they live day by day, day by day. They don't even know what day it is. They don't know what time it is. All they know when the sun rises, it's time to go hunt and get some food. When time that they see the sun going down, it's time to get back to the hut. Those guys don't even have any concept of heaven or hell, so they don't even fear death at all. They have when someone dies in their tribe or whatever the case may be, those guys go they throw them in a hole or something. I don't really know what they do. They throw them in a hole and they drink some kombucha. You understand me? You understand me? So these guys are living free. But however, we live in the Western world and we have been taught all of these different beliefs and these systems. So now we tend to, despite the fact we may be so advanced in technology and all of these other areas that we may be so advanced in, we tend to be so afraid of all of these primitive ideologies and these primitive belief systems that we absolutely have no evidence that it is true. We are talking about the most intelligent people on the planet, scientists, doctors, lawyers, the most people who, brain surgeons, atomic individuals who are able to split the atom, still have fear of certain things that they have no control over, that they cannot see. So the average person, no matter who we are, we just tend to have this natural fear of death, of the unknown. So again, this is something, if we can overcome this obstacle, this fear of death, there's going to be somewhat of a freedom, and we're going to be escape this bondage that has kept us in somewhat captivity, mental slavery, afraid of dying and being punished and getting some type of eternity punishment, and actually just doing good because of fear of punishment. We should do good because we want to do good. We should do good because good is the right thing to do. We love thy neighbors, they love themselves. Try not to harm any individuals because you don't want to get harmed. Try not to steal anything from anybody because you don't want anybody to steal from you. However, we should not do good things solely because of being afraid of eternal condemnation in a lake of fire.
Before we were born, we didn't know who we were. We didn't know anything. We don't have any remembrance of any emotions, any feelings, or anything of that sort. We don't really remember anything before we were born. And however, we just appeared shortly thereafter. And however, that knowing nothingness, that no existenceness, this non-existenceness, that would be a perfect example of death. And also, uh, from that perspective, again, there was nothing really to be afraid of because there was nothing to be aware of. And so another example of this.
Now, I don't want to overlook that concept because that's a very, very, very powerful concept. Again, this information I'm talking about here, this channel again is not more so for entertainment. This is more so for education purposes, spiritual life transformation, growth, things of that sort. So again, like I was saying, the one of the best examples that we could think of based on our experience, what is what is probable, if I may say, what what death feels like, if I may say, or what death probably feels like, or what death possibly feels like is like before we were born. Before we were born, we don't have any real uh, remembrance of anything before we were born. We can't really think of anything. Some individuals do have, some in rare cases, some individuals do have uh, what they call remembrance of the previous life. Some individuals could remember their last lifetime, things of that sort. Some individuals have had near-death experience. Some individuals have, you know, died and had some experience where they had some experience seeing the light and different things of that sort. But I'm not necessarily talking about that per se. What I'm talking about is, do you remember feeling anything or remembering anything before you were born? And the answer would be, in most cases, no. There again are a very select few of people who actually have had some type of remembrance again of a previous life. Some individuals could go back, especially kids. There are a lot of kids all over the world who remember their past lives. But however, that is very uncommon. Those would be considered outliers. I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the average traditional person. Do you remember having any remembrance of any experience, feeling, emotion before you were born? The answer would be no. So, however, like I said also earlier, do you remember ever feeling like you came into the world at a particular time? The answer would also be no. So, the best example that I could think of that we could use as example of what death most likely is, or is most likely probabilistically the same, would be that feeling of not remembering anything or not knowing anything. I'm not saying after you die there may not be some transition or so. I'm not getting into all of that. I'm just saying to you that the feeling of not remembering anything, not knowing anything, that would be an example of a time that you were dead. You were that would be a perfect example of what it would be like to have died or was dead, because you don't remember anything. And it's not that there was nothing, it was nothing there to remember. It's just that there's a difference between nothing and no thing. So it was just that there was no thing for you to remember, but you still could have been aware, you still could have been conscious, you still could have been awake, which brings me to my next point. Something more like a deep sleep, something of that sort, a deep dreamless sleep. That would be another good example of what it would be. Example would be like more so what is most likely probable to experience what death is would be like. Just having an experience of nothingness, but not saying that there's nothing there. It's just that no thing is there for you to be aware of, but you're just aware of nothing, but you're still aware because you are awareness itself. Again, somewhat of a mind twister, but again, let me go on and go on a little further and more depth.
This feeling of death, this experience of death, would be in meditation, deep meditation. When we go into deep meditation, we will experience a no thingness, a sense of stillness, a sense of quietness, whereas we are not aware of anything and we just go into this blank void space, if I may say. That would be another example of this thing called death as well, or the perceived concept of death. And then we also have the concept of the dream state. When we go into deep, sorry, not the dream state, the deep sleep state is when we go into a state of nothingness as well. And that state, that deep sleep state, is also a place where there's actually no awareness of no thing. We are aware, but we are just aware of no thing. And most individuals would say there was nothing to be aware of. They don't remember the dream, the deep sleep state, and that is correct. There was the reason they don't remember anything, because there was nothing to be aware of. There was no objects to be aware of, and that is the goal of deep sleep, is to basically go back to that place of non-awareness of objects. And that is the reason why you don't remember anything. It's not that you was not aware, you just was not aware of any objects, but you are aware of awareness itself. Because if you were not aware, you would not remember not having anything to be aware of, if that made any sense. So
Very, very complex idea I was trying to relay. However, I did give three examples of what will be most likely probable. A probable experience to death would be, again, before you were born, you don't remember anything, you have no experience of anything, you can't remember any feelings, emotions, any thoughts. That would be one example of what death is most likely is probable. Again, I'm not here to convince anybody what death is like, because I can't remember myself. But however, I'm saying that those experiences of having no memory of nothing, no feeling of nothing, no nothing of that sort, would be most likely, probably, that is what death would be like at some point. And then also the second example I said when you go into deep meditation and you go into the nothingness, the void, and there's for some short period of time we go into that blank state where we forget all things, we forget where we're at, we forget what we're doing. That deep meditation state, that silence, that stillness, that would also be an example similar to that before we were born, that lack of memory, loss of sense, five senses, that would be an example. And then the third example would be the deep sleep, the dreamless state. When we go into that state of dreamless sleep, that would also be an example of what death most likely, probably, probabilistically would be like. Again, I'm just speaking from a probable perspective. I'm not saying these are factual facts because I'm not I'm not the Grim Reaper. You understand me? So, but again, like I said, these would be examples when we go into that dream state, deep sleep state. And some of us will say, "Oh, I don't remember anything when I dreamt. I don't remember any dreams or anything." And so you feel like you are not aware during the deep sleep state. However, you are aware because if you were not aware, you would not realize that there was nothing to be aware of. I don't know if that made any sense. Again, very complex idea that I'm trying to convey here. But again, even in the deepest of sleep states, you are still aware because you are aware that there was nothing to be aware of. You're simply aware of awareness itself, if that makes any sense.
Oh, and another example would be when we go to take an operation or have an operation, we go into something called anesthesia. And anesthesia would be something where they give you a drug and then the body, the mind, and all that is incapacitated. And that too is a state of nothingness where all sense of awareness tends to disappear and we don't remember any feelings or emotions or anything of that sort. We just pretty much go back into that place of nothingness. So again, those would be examples of death-like symptoms, if I may say, death-like experiences, if I may, to be more exact. So, however, the root cause of this fear of death is not knowing who you are. And that really comes from the ego, the false self. The false self does not want to basically die. Having a
And then again, last example, going in some operation under anesthesia, you don't have any memory of anything. You don't know that you're on the operating table. In some cases, sometimes people do have experience where they can feel, at least not they can't feel, but they can see or they can hear doctors talking and so forth and so on. So there are cases where individuals are aware that they are being operated on under anesthesia. However, it doesn't happen every day. But for example, again, that would be a good example to where the mind pretty much disappears and we don't know have any type of remembrance of what's going on around us. We don't know who we are. We don't know anything. So anesthesia would be another example of what is most likely probable of what death would be like. And so again, the fear of death, again, what I'm about to talk about now, has something to do with the ego as well. The ego, the false self, having a hard time not wanting to accept its non-existence. So that's why I think I'm going to go with this as well. But again, like I said, I have not, I don't know what I'm about to say per se, because I created this video about 8 months ago. I never watched it. Now I'm going back over the video to see what it's saying.
ego death is like going into being non-existence, and that is the root cause of this fear, because the false self, the false the ego is the self that you think you are, that does not want to die, that does not want to go anywhere. So that is what is causing the fear. However, when you do self-inquiry, when you look into yourself and you do self-introspection and things of that sort, that fear will dissipate. And that is what we're talking about here today, trying to gain the freedom from that fear of death. And so we can regain the freedom and live our life and not be robbed from this fear of something that we are not actually sure what it is per se. Because from an existentialist perspective, the being, the self, the consciousness The isness is the fundamental principle, the fundamental aspect of life itself. And so, therefore, having a religious belief or some religious belief telling you that there will be some type of punishment and punishment or reward without actually having any evidence of this, this would be considered bad faith. From an existentialist perspective, having bad faith would be something, believing something, and you deep down inside, you know it doesn't really feel right or something feels wrong with it, but you believe it anyhow because you tend to make up some type of excuse for why you believe it. And it creates what they call cognitive dissonance. And when the cognitive dissonance is when you have two or more conflicting thoughts or ideas or beliefs, and one thought is telling you something, and another thought is telling you some other thing, and it just basically makes you feel very uncomfortable and at ease. For example, from a religious perspective, most individuals would say, despite whatever they believe, unless you use the Western religion perspective, going to be punished for eternity, and only have lived for such a short period of time in this life, that doesn't sound too fair. That doesn't sound too, most individuals would struggle with that. But however, some part of them, they would accept it and they say, well, hey, we can't question God or we can't question the word of God. But they know within themselves that does not sound like a good deal, because why would you go and get punished for eternity and for doing something and you only lived a few years of your life? So that kind of doesn't really make much sense. However, when you have a belief, a religious belief, you are not able to question anything. You just have to basically blindly believe and accept whatever that doctrine says to be true.
So, like I was saying, so there's literally something called bad faith in psychology and philosophy. You guys could go and check it out as well. So, bad faith is simply having a belief in something, but you have no evidence, no reasonable evidence, if I may say, to believe is true, but you believe it anyhow. And so, when we have bad faith, believing in things that we have no evidence to believe that is true, it also creates something called cognitive dissonance. And so the cognitive dissonance is basically having two emotional or psychological beliefs that somewhat oppose each other. So, for example, we believed, according to our religious beliefs, we were told that, hey, if you believe, if you don't do right, you're going to go and you're going to be punished, you're going to be sent to hell, and you're going to be sent to eternal damnation in the lake of fire. And then if you do good, we're going to be sent to heaven, and things are going to be good, and everything is going to be great. You're going to have a good time. You know what I'm saying? Drinks and parties and all these things be going on. Freak offs. That was a bad joke. But it was a joke nevertheless. You understand me? So I don't think it'll be no freak offs in heaven. That's a little bad joke. That's a very bad joke. See it as Easter as well. Easter Monday. That's a bad joke. I take that one back. But anyhow, so like I was saying, so cognitive dissonance is like more so when we have two different belief systems that somewhat contradict each other, we feel torn between those beliefs. So I know for a fact there are many believers who may believe what they believe to be true about heaven and hell, but however, most believers may feel like they have cognitive dissonance in reference to heaven and hell, especially hell. Most individuals who have Abrahamic faiths, they may believe that, God is a loving God and God cares for me and God is a compassionate and merciful God. Most individuals do believe that wholeheartedly, and that is fine. However, where the cognitive dissonance comes in is that most individuals believe that how could this loving God, send me to eternal damnation? I've only been on this world for X amount of years. That doesn't sound too right. How could somebody be punished for eternity, technically, when they've actually been alive only for 20, 30, 40 years, 50, even 70 years, even 80 years, even 100 years is a small drop in the bucket to compare to eternity. So that is where the cognitive dissonance would come in, where individuals will question their beliefs silently. They may not say it out loud, but because, again, that is why they call it a belief. You have to believe, but you cannot question. So most individuals would not necessarily go and question their pastor or question their spiritual leaders to say, hey, how could God send me to punish me for eternity, and actually I've only been alive for X amount of time. It's like picturing a kid, per se, a 12-year-old or some kid who just barely starts to understand life, sorry, who doesn't even have any idea of what life is, and that child pretty much stole a few candy bars or something from the store, or whatever the case may be. That child maybe might have been born in poverty. I'm not advocating that stealing is good. I'm just saying that sometimes conditions will lead individuals to do anything. That is why some individuals are prostitutes, and the list goes on and on and on. Under circumstances, anyone is capable of doing anything. You guys must say, hey, I would never steal, but hey, you guys have never really been in such a position to where you had maybe a child at home and you had some no other option, and so you can't really say what you would do until you are in that position. However, think about a child again being 12 years old, 13 years old, just coming into the world, and maybe did a few bad deeds, and maybe even then that child is going to be sent to eternal damnation and die and go to hell. That would make a lot of individuals question their belief. That is where the cognitive dissonance would come in. And then you have individuals as well who are from different cultures, different places. Believe it or not, there's some people who have never even heard of Jesus. It sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but believe it or not, there are some real indigenous people in the bush somewhere who have never seen a Bible. Most of these, and then they have what they call the missionaries. The missionaries go to these indigenous places and they try to spread the gospel. They try to spread their beliefs to these individuals. But however, again, like I said, there literally are some individuals across the globe who have never seen a Bible. There are individuals across the globe who have never heard of heaven and hell. So it would be again, somewhat would cause a cognitive dissonance to believe that a God would send these people to hell as well, who never even heard, who got the opportunity to believe. So that is again, but again, you cannot question those things. You just have to believe and take it by faith. That is again why I said I do not believe in believing.
So that in itself would be something what I would be considered to be delusional, believing things that are not necessarily true, but you accept them to be true without having the proper evidence. So again, this would also cause a disharmonious belief in ourselves, because now we are somewhat delusional. And so many would say that I don't know if you guys ever heard of something called Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager is a belief, not really a belief, but a philosophical concept that it is much better to believe in God than not, because Pascal wager says that if you believe in God and then God does exist and you do live, a godly life, and you do live a godly life, you get to go to heaven and you get rewarded. But if you do not believe in God and God does exist, and then you will be punished for eternity. So that is like a catch-22. If you believe and it works out in your favor, it's a win. And if you believe and there is no God, it still works out in your favor. So you had nothing to lose. However, that is incorrect, because you do lose a lot of things when you have beliefs that you do not necessarily know is true, or you do not have any sufficient evidence, because it limits you as the person that you are. It limits your relationships with individuals, your beliefs. If you look at the history of religion, religion has caused so many deaths and so many pain and suffering throughout the decades and so forth. We have no idea, if we go back in time, most individuals will not believe that their beliefs have done the atrocities that their beliefs have done, their religious beliefs, the things that they believe. They would not believe that their religion could have done those things. But yes, there was a lot of death and punishment and persecution in the name of God and religion. So the same way, you might not go to that extent, such as the Inquisition, to torture individuals who do not have the same beliefs as you. However, you might not be that extreme. However, you do not, if you do have a belief, a particular religious belief, we tend to not uh, see other individuals with different beliefs as being equal. We tend.
So let me just go over that very briefly. So again, for those of you guys who are watching who may be familiar with Pascal's wager, Pascal's wager is a very old philosophical concept, uh, believing that most individuals again believe that it would be better. And again, I'm not saying what you should believe or what you should not believe. I am just again here to educate and inform. I'm not here to say what you should believe or not. But again, Pascal's wager states that it would be in your best interest. Most people believe because believe in God, if I may say, because it would be in their best interest to believe in a God. Because if there is a God and you are wrong, then you would be punished for eternity because you choose the wrong choice. So it would be best if you believe, and then if you even if you are wrong and there was no God, no harm, no foul done. That is the concept. Believe, and if you are right, you spend eternity, drinking milk and honey, with the freak offs. Bad joke. Bad joke again. I just had to say it. But anyhow, you know, if you are right, if you die and you do believe, it would be in your best interest because now you get to spend eternity in heaven. You get to have, all the mansions and all of these stuff according to what the biblical scriptures say. That would be in your best interest to believe. And so it will always, according to Pascal's wager, it still will also be in your best interest if you believe in a God and there is no God after death. You had nothing to lose. That is what Pascal wager is saying. Again, some philosophical uh, philosophy. Go and check it out. It's a real concept. However, what individuals fail to realize is that is not the truth. Beliefs do cause harm. Beliefs do cause pain and suffering because throughout the ages, for decades and hundreds of years, individuals have suffered tremendously in the name of religion because of their beliefs. Individuals having one belief and they believe that their belief is the true belief, and that is most where most of our wars come from today. One religion believes that their religion is the true religion and their religion is more superior than the other religion, and so therefore when individuals go to war and they fight each other, they tend to believe that the other individuals who are being killed, they are subhuman. Those individuals are not necessarily human. So we tend to believe that having beliefs is innocent and harmless, but in reality, that is not the case. Because you and I may not go to the extreme to start a war over our religious belief. However, we may not go to that extent to start a war over our religious belief, but we will discriminate against somebody else who does not look like us, who does not sound like us, and individuals who may also have a different belief as well. They may be individuals who even would discriminate against me. Right now, maybe looking at me and say, hey, this guy looks like he has some type of different belief or he has some type of different concept or something going on, and some individual will actually discriminate as well. So it's not just being harmless, and hey, I might actually have something very powerful to say. I might have something very, very important that you could learn from. But however, because I do sound different, I do look different, I do have a different from a different culture, I do appear to have a different religious belief than some individuals will discriminate. Some individuals will say, hey, I'm not gonna listen to this guy, I'm not gonna do this, this guy doesn't have anything to say, he doesn't know anything because hey, so yes, religion is not harmless as we tend to think, and yes, we may not go to the extreme, like I said, to start a war, but we do discriminate. If you are an employer, you might actually not give an individual an opportunity to get a job because you may feel like, hey, this individual does not have my belief, or whatever the case may. It might be someone in a relationship. You might be of a certain belief. You might not get involved with a female. Someone might actually love you. This person might be the best person for you, but again, because that person's religion may not line up with your family's religion, and your family may not accept that person. So you tend to, you might actually reject that person based on your religion, religious beliefs, based on your family alone are not accepting that person. So again, we cannot say that religion is harmless or beliefs are harmless, because one way, shape, form, or another, we tend to actually, it comes out in one way, shape, or form or another. We tend to believe others, again, who do not sound like us, others who do not look like us, others who do not believe like us. We tend to look at these individuals as being, again, like I said, subhuman. We tend to not give them the same equal footing as us. And that is what it is. That is the way it is. And that is just the way it is. So again, we tend to see individuals who do not share the same beliefs as us as being somewhat inferior, and even, if I may say, somewhat ignorant for believing the things that they believe.
And to look at their beliefs as being inferior, so therefore their beliefs is inferior, so they are inferior as a people in general, because we tend to identify our beliefs directly with who we are as well. We tend to believe our beliefs, or who we are. So we tend to treat individuals a certain particular way because of their beliefs as well. And we notice, because there's all type of wars all over the world. This particular race, this particular religion is fighting with this particular religion because they believe this particular thing, this particular piece of land is ours. We inherited this and this and that. And we see this going on today. Individuals being slaughtered, individuals being killed in the name of their God. So we cannot say that having a religious belief is harmless. That is not the case. It was never harmless back then, and it is not harmless today. And that is why most individuals who watch my videos, they will know by now that I say that I do not believe in believing. Believing is somewhat what I would call blind faith. Believing in things that you do not necessarily know to be true would be somewhat I would call delusional. So again, believing in things is not harmless, and that is what we're talking about today, because having these religious beliefs about a particular religion, sect, or whatever, thinking that you will die and be punished and this and that, has robbed you from the very life that you have been given today. So yes, it is not, you might not have harmed another person because of your belief, but you are actually harming yourself. You are given the gift of life to live your life, but you somehow, for whatever reason, you are not living your life to the fullest. You are living in bondage. You are living in somewhat of a cage, per se, or a prison, more likely to be accurate than to be free. So freedom is what we are talking about here today. Achieving freedom, which only can be achieved from knowing who you are. So again, once we come to know who we are, this fear of this perceived death will no longer be the case. And for example, something came across my mind as there was a biblical story when Jesus Christos, he brought the dead girl, Jairus, I think she was 12 years old. He brought her back to life, and everybody was crying, and everybody was, heartbroken and all that. And Joshua Christos, Jesus, said that she was asleep. So that in itself, why would Jesus use the term sleep to reference death if it was nothing more than a state of sleep, a state of unconsciousness per se of objects, but still being aware. So he did not say that she was unconscious. He did not say that she was paralyzed. He did not say any of these things. He said that she was asleep. So if we see death for what it is, a perceived the perceived idea of non-existence, and there's no such thing as nothing non-existence. There will always be existence, because if you are the existence itself, you will always exist, and there needs to be no creator to create existence, because existence is intrinsic of itself That is why they call it existence. So again, so when we get rid of this fear of death, when we get rid of this fear of the punishment, only then we can see and have a greater appreciation for the life that we was given. But until then, we will never really embrace the life because we will always have some type of restriction, and we will also always live in fear, thinking that if I do not be this way, I do not do that, I will be punished. And which brings me to another point. That's this most of our behaviors from a religious perspective, our moral behaviors, we are not acting morally by nature. We are acting morally out of fear.
So let me just recap very quickly about the story about the biblical story about the daughter, if I remember clearly, the daughter of Jairus, who Jesus Christos Joshua Jesus brought back to life. There was Jairus' daughter. I think she was 12 years old and she died. And Jesus Christos Joshua was called to to her aid. And however, when Joshua Christos Joshua Jesus came to the place, she was dead, and everybody was crying, everybody was mourning, and Jesus said, "Oh no, she's not dead. She is simply asleep." And so the point, what I was trying to make earlier was, if death was such this big thing, this big thing, why did Jesus not say, you know, oh, she was dead, but I'm gonna wake up? Or why did he say something that he simply said that she was asleep? That is what he said. He said that she was asleep, and so therefore he did not put any emphasis on anything else. He said that she was asleep. Why would he use something so uh, something so trivial to compare, using some words such as sleep, so trivial to compare with something so serious such as death? Because he knew it was nothing more than a deep sleep, a state of unconsciousness or unawareness. That is what he knew. So that is why he looked at it as being more so as a deep, dreamless, meditative sleep, a condition where awareness, consciousness still was present, but the objective, the body, and all of these other things was not.
We are afraid to go and be punished. That is why we do the things that we do. That doesn't sound morally correct. What I'm saying is that those individuals who are religious, they would say that without a God per se, there cannot be morality, and that is incorrect because you have atheists who, some of those guys and girls are the most moral individuals there are, because they don't have a deity per se to correct them or punish them. Most all of their actions come from their own eternal self. They're not afraid of being punished, so they do good. They do good because they feel that is the most moral right thing to do. However, when you have a belief system, a religious belief, you are not necessarily doing the right thing because you want to do the right thing, or you are naturally moral. You are most likely doing it because out of fear. You are being the nice person that you are because of fear of this punishment after death. So you start to see where I'm going with this. This death, this fear of death, this not knowing who you are is not just harmless. There is consequences. There is things that come out of this very negative. We treat others, individuals, differently because of having different beliefs. We segregate ourselves. We don't love others because of their beliefs. We harm others because of their beliefs, and so forth and so on. So back to what I was saying again, morally, from an existentialist perspective, we have the ability to create our own purpose and become good or bad based on our own actions. We can do right or wrong from our own understanding of what is right and wrong.
So this is another very powerful fact that I guess that most individuals will argue and reference. And again, I am speaking from an existentialist perspective. I'm not saying that anybody's belief is incorrect or wrong or right or anything of that sort. However, I am saying that because of this fear of punishment, this fear after we die if we do not do the right things, we believe because of this fear that we were told that we would be punished, we would go to hell, we would stay in damnation forever. Because of that fear, the majority of us, we act accordingly because of that fear of eternal punishment. If that fear of punishment after death was not there, the majority of us would behave lawlessly. The majority of us would behave uncontrollably. However, because of that fear of death, thinking that there will be some punishment, that keeps most of us in check. So again, that fear robs us of our natural inclination to be moral individuals. Most of us, again, believe that from a religious perspective, we believe that if there is no God, we believe that we cannot be moral. And so when we look at it from that perspective, we have millions of atheists. I am not an atheist. I'm just saying to you guys, there are millions of atheists who do not believe in that the probably that probabilistically uh, there's not a God. Those guys are still morally moral individuals. Those guys literally are still moral. Those guys do not rely on a religious belief to do the right thing. Those guys do what they do because they know what's morally right from wrong. They naturally have a natural inclination to want to do the right thing because they do not want anyone to do them harm. They do not steal because they don't want anybody to steal from them. They do not kill because they don't want anyone to kill from them. So it is somewhat theoretically incorrect to believe that if there is no God, then we would just be morally animals. I don't think that is correct at all. I think we know we don't want what we don't want to do to us, we would not do it to anybody else. If that was not the case, why do individuals steal when nobody is around? If it was not a big issue, you should go and steal openly. I mean, some individuals do rob openly. Some individuals do go and break break into stores and pull guns on people literally in the broad daylight. Some individuals do it. Yes, that's correct. However, some individuals, majority of the crime happens when nobody is around, when the people are away from their buildings, of their workplaces. That is when the places are broken into. Cars are broken into when nobody is there. Cars are not broken into when you're sitting down in your car. No, your battery is not stolen when you're driving your car or you're sitting down on the beach or the park in your car. It happens when nobody is there. Cheating affairs does not happen openly in the front of the person that you're cheating on. In most cases, these things happen when you are literally away from the person. So if these things were naturally not known to us by our natural nature, we would do these things openly. But because we do know what is right from wrong, whether we believe in God or not, we do these things undercover, and that is my proof that we will be able to. We could not have a belief in a particular deity, in a particular God, but we know what is right from wrong because everything that we do is wrong. We tend to do it when nobody else is watching. So therefore, that further proves again, we know what is right from wrong, no matter what. If we did not care, we would just go ahead and do it in broad daylight in front of millions and millions of people and don't care about the punishment at all.
And there needs to be no creator per se, because like I said, the atheists, most atheists, those individuals are more moral than many other religious or theist individuals, because the atheist does not have any fear of punishment they do the right thing because that is the right thing to do. Unlike a religious individual, they are doing the right thing because they feel they are going to be punished by some creator or some being or entity that has uh, that has the control over them. And please go and watch my video, Who Am I? That video is going to tell you guys in greater detail about what I'm talking about also as well. So for example, it would be more like being in a relationship, being in a relationship with a female or male, and that female abuses you, uh, and you want to leave, and you want to leave, and they tell you, they say, oh, uh, you could leave if you want. You could leave if you want, but if you leave, I'm gonna kill you. And then they say, but you have free will. You have the free will to leave if you want, but the consequences is I'm gonna kill you. So does that really sound like free will? Because that's what most religious individuals will say. Is because we have free will. We do not have free will when we have a gun to our head. It's not by choice that we choose. Most individuals choose their religious belief out of fear. And
So let me just retract just a few seconds back. And by no means I want anyone to say that and think that I am trying to promote atheism. No, I'm not promoting any atheism at all. However, I will say I believe that many atheists are far more religious. Sorry, incorrect. I think that there are many atheists that are more moral, have more moral and higher moral standards than many religious individuals who follow traditional religious beliefs. And the reason I say that is because if you're an atheist, you do what is right because you feel or you know that is the right thing to do. You're not doing it out of any fear. You're doing it because you, again, love thy neighbor because, love thyself as thou love thy neighbor. That is the principle that atheists follow. They don't have to believe in a creator God to do the right thing. They just know that it is just not morally correct to harm another individual, to steal from another individual, and they do not have any fear of any repercussions after death. So an atheist, their natural nature to do the right thing is more of a natural state, if I may say, versus someone who has more of a religious belief. Most individuals who have religious beliefs, they do the right thing because they believe they have a fear of punishment and they believe that their God will punish them. So that is why they will do the right thing. They do the right thing out of fear, not so much as doing the right thing because it's literally the right thing to do. They do it because they feel like if I don't do it, if I don't do the right thing, my God is gonna punish me. And if I continue to do the wrong thing, I'm gonna go to hell as well. So you see, that's a big difference of the two different individuals' action. You have the atheists performing good deeds because they naturally, morally believe that is correct, and then you have somebody following a religious belief doing the right thing because they believe that if they do not do the right thing, they will be punished. That is a completely different situation. And then you have some individuals who would say we have free will, and so yes, that is a big debate as well, whether free will exists as well. Yes, I must say that yes, that is true. Some individuals do uh, debate that we have free will. However, think of it this way. Like I said, again, let's say if you are in a relationship with a girl or a male or a female, and your partner tells you, hey, I love you so much, I love you so much, do you love me? And then you say, and then your partner say, whatever you do, you better say yes, because if you don't say yes, I'm going to put a gun to your head and I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to punish you. I'm going to put you in a room. I'm going to starve you. I'm going to beat you for eternity. So the average person, if they were in a position like that, and they know that that person has the power to punish them, the average person will say, "Yes, I do love you," because they fear getting punished. They fear. So, does that person have any free will? Free will, true free will, would be more so having an option to choose between two things without there being any repercussions. That is true free will. And from a religious perspective, we do not have free will because there is some type of repercussion keeping us from choosing the other option. Again, just like the relationship, the person in the relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, says, "Hey, if you tell me you do not love me, I will shoot you or I will harm you forever." That person might be so afraid, they will say, "Yes, baby, I love you, I love you, I love you," because they're afraid of punishment. And the same thing would apply to our religious beliefs as well. We believe in our beliefs because of this fear of eternal punishment, and we fear if we do bad things, we will get punished. So that is a completely different type of reward and punishment perspective. So the atheist would be considered more moral from that theoretically because they are doing things out of the goodness of their heart, morally by nature, because they don't fear any life after death punishment. They don't fear God sending them to hell. They don't fear anybody punishing them forever. And so they naturally are doing good deeds versus the religious person who is doing all of the good deeds because they think that they will get some reward after life, or they feel like if they do good things, good deeds in this lifetime, God will reward them in this lifetime as well. That is a big, big difference. We must pay attention to that as well.
And so again, just like saying being in a relationship, when your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend tell you you could stay, you have the choice to stay or go. You have the freedom to come or go, but if you leave, I will kill you. And that is not free will. So that is exactly how religion is. They're saying that you could follow me or spend eternity in damnation and hell. That is what the options are. So most individuals, again, because they do not know who they are, they pick the option of uh, to follow the masses. Again, Pascal's wager is much easier, is more safer to believe and be safe than to not believe and be punished eternally. So that free will uh, concept does not necessarily, scrutiny does not stand up because again, most individuals, if you take away the fear or the punishment of hell and eternal damnation and all of these things, most individuals would not believe in any religions. However, because most individuals do not know themselves, they do not know who they are, they naturally can be misled into believing fallacies. So this is what this video is all about today, coming to an understanding of who you are and what you are. And when you come to the understanding of who you are and what you are, your fear of death in itself also will dissolve, because there is nothing to be afraid of, because there is nothing that is going to die. We are talking about the object dies, the body dies, the mind dies, things of that sort. The objective changing thing dies, but the subject, the consciousness, the awareness, those traits of what I'm talking about are eternal. So it is very important that we come to some type of realization in this lifetime. In spirituality, it is called the great death, to experience death once we are alive. And I'm not talking about dying medically on the deathbed and heart stopping and coming back to life. I'm talking about dying consciously, knowing who you are, the ego death, the false self death. That is what I'm talking about. And that is what they are calling in spirituality to be born again. That is what we're talking about, not being born again at a later time, at a later date, at a later place. I'm talking about being born again presently in this lifetime, in this lifetime, in this world, not somewhere else, not going somewhere else, not looking to be somewhere else. And then when you look somewhere else, to go somewhere else, to be somewhere else, other than now here, you rob yourself of the precious now that all exists and only exists is the now. But if you continue to believe all of these things, you are robbing yourself of the life, the precious life that you are given. And that is what I'm talking about today as well. So having these beliefs that deceive us into all of these having these fears is not just harmless, it is actually very, very, very detrimental to our life itself. So with that being said, hopefully this.
So that is also another powerful point that I don't want to just go over and overlook. In many esoteric and spiritual arenas, they call awakening. Some call it awakening, some call it uh, self-realization, and also is called the great death. The great death is when we come to this realization when we are alive, and we come to know who we are when we are alive. We don't have to wait till we die. We don't have to wait till we go, to a certain, different realm or whatever the case may be. Self-realization is coming to that awareness today. That's what the Buddhists, the Hindus, that is what they're talking about. Jivan Muti, coming to that self-realization, awakening in this lifetime. Most individuals might not be aware when they hear about the Buddha. The Buddha was a real person, and the Buddha just simply means the enlightened one. So if you come, just like Jesus Christos, Joshua, Christ simply means the anointed one. So when you become awakened in this lifetime, you come to know who you are. That is what we're trying to achieve in this lifetime. And once we come to realize who we are as the self, the true self, the isness, the I-ness, the consciousness, the awareness, the being aspect of who we are, we will fear death no more, because we will understand that the essence of who we are is not tangible. The essence, the consciousness is something, the awareness is something that is not subject to the physical death like the body. And so once we come to these deep realization through deep introspection, meditation, and self realization, then only then the fear of death will start to dissipate. But as long as we identify with the false ego, the false self, that's believing that I am a doctor, I am a girl, I am a boy, I am a carpenter, I am this, I am an auntie, I am a son, I am a mother, I am a brother. As long as we identify with this false ego, this false self, we will always fear death, because we know once we truly identify with this body, we know that the body fades away. We know that the body will somewhat, at some point, dissolve, give away. At some point, the body must fail, and because of our our lack of understanding of who we truly are, the fear of death will always be there. And only when we come to realize who we are, what we are at the core, only then that the fear of death will disappear. At least to the most, for the most part, it should, if I may say.
Video give each and every one of you some type of understanding to at least do self evaluation and self inquiry, and to know thyself. Because if at least one person could be come to realization and not have the fear of death, that would be a great thing. However, that understanding is not going to go away only until you know yourself. So the fear of death is nothing more than an illusion. And when you come to knowing thyself, that fear will dissipate, and eventually that fear itself will disappear. If you ask me, am I afraid of death? No, I am not. I am 110% not afraid of death. However, I am not telling you that I am lining up to die. I'm not saying that I want to die. I love my life. I love being alive. However, if I was to just die suddenly, I would not have the fear of death, because of my understanding. I do not think there will be anything to fear. Unlike individuals who are religious, they have all of these very strong beliefs about life and after death and all that. However, they are extremely afraid of death, and that doesn't make sense. If you are given such certainty that you would get all of these rewards after death, why would you still be afraid? That does not make any sense at all. So therefore, that is what I'm saying again, being delusional, lying to oneself, again in bad faith, believing something that you know that you do not necessarily believe, but you have to believe it because of, again, your culture, your family, your relationships with friends, and so forth in the community. They tell you to believe this thing, so you believe it at all costs, despite the fact you may not necessarily 110% resonate with that belief, but you do. So again, your freedom is being violated because of this belief. Again, making the point, all any beliefs is not harmful.
So, briefly, very briefly, like I said again, our beliefs are not harmful, whether we harm nobody or not, whether we don't do any harmful things to individuals, we are literally harming ourselves because we are, it might not be physical, but psychologically, we are putting ourselves through stress for a very long time, worrying about something that we absolutely have no idea at all what the outcome is going to be. But we worry, we let's say we live to be 90, 100 years old, and we adopted a particular religious belief at the age of 20. And so at the age of, we lived to be 100, we became a particular belief at 20. So that's 80 years of our life we have devoted our beliefs to certain things that we don't even know to be true. So therefore, 80 years of our lives, I would consider us to be delusional, such putting such certainty in certain things that we do not really necessarily know to be true, but we believe these things to be true either way. And also, I would also say as well, so some people, some individuals as well, they have such strong beliefs that their belief system is correct. They believe that what they believe is true. They know for a fact that their belief is so true. If your belief is so true, why are you still afraid to die? If your belief system is so concrete, you should be lining up. As far as I'm concerned, if everybody knew that heaven was a fact, that we're gonna go to this place and we're gonna get away from this place called earth and all this sickness and sorrow and heartache, why do nobody want to die? I don't understand that yet. If somebody told you the other day, said, hey, your great 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 granddaddy left you $300 billion in the bank, you should go and collect that tomorrow, or go and collect that in 24 hours, or you will lose it all. I don't care where the average person is, they would be heading to the bank. If a person was in labor, if a person was in labor and they had to get to the bank in 24 hours to retrieve that $200 billion or whatever I just said, if they were in labor, as soon as that baby came out, they would be in the bank signing that paper. You understand me? They would be there at the bank, get that money no matter what, because they would not forfeit that. They would be there no matter what. If heaven was so a place that we all were so certain that we was gonna be, as soon as life got down, hey, we know heaven is there. Hey, I don't care. When individuals who have all of these strong beliefs that they have all these religious beliefs that they're gonna go to heaven, when these individuals get sick, man, they take more medicine, they take all kind of pills, they do all kind of therapy, they do everything in their power to stay alive. Why do these individuals do everything in their power to stay alive when they have such certainty that they're gonna go to heaven? They do not have any certainty, because if they had certainty, man, they would say, look here, let me just go. I don't want to take any pill. I don't want to take any medicine. I just want to die right now, because I know I'm going to be walking the streets in a pave of gold. I'm going to be drinking milk and honey. But no, that is not the case, because they are doing the actual opposite. When individuals who are sick, who have all of these belief systems, they do everything in their power to stay alive, because they know for a fact they would rather stay alive than to be dead. So all of our beliefs thinking that this will happen after we die, that will happen after die, they are most likely based on non-factual things. Like I said, philosophically, it is called having bad faith. And having bad faith also produces cognitive dissonance. We know for a fact that we don't want to die. We know for a fact that we have doubts about this heaven and hell thing, but we have to believe it either way. So again, that is what I'm talking about. Coming to some type of realization, understanding who we are, first and foremost, eliminating all of these false dissonance, cognitive dissonance, false belief, these illusions and illusions and hallucinations, and coming to some realization, stepping into reality, taking our power back, overcoming the obstacles, becoming free that we were meant to be. That is what I'm talking about. So religion is not necessarily harmless per se. Even if you're not harming somebody else, you're literally harming yourself in one shape or another. You're robbing yourself out of the one precious life that you were given to be alive. Life's supposed to be something that we're supposed to enjoy, not supposed to be afraid of. And that's what we are doing when we have these beliefs. We are literally walking on eggshells, robbing us each and every day of the journey of joy, peace, and happiness that we're supposed to be going through, but that is not the case. Our religion keeps us dormant from that happening, becoming our best selves. Some of our characteristics, some of our traits, some things that we may be good at, we cannot do because hey, we feel like our religion is going to stop us. And there's so much different things that keep us held back because of our religion. Like I said, you might have someone who may love you, but you might love that person too, but you might not be able to get involved with that person because of their religious background, their religious belief. You might feel like your family is not going to accept that person, and all type different type of things that religion actually keeps us somewhat stagnant. If I like I say, majority of the wars that are going on today has some type of religious connotation behind it. So again, religion is not harmless. Our beliefs in these afterlife realities that we have no evidence to be is not harmless as well.
They are harmful in one way, shape, or form, whether it be physical, psychological, emotional, and mainly spiritually. They are all harmful. All beliefs, all religions are harmful in one way or another. And I'm just saying this from an existentialist perspective. That is where I am coming from. So with that being said, I think I'm going to end this video. And I thank each and every one of you once again for sticking around this long and watching all of my videos. For those of you who have liked, shared, and subscribed, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And someday, at some point, I will start creating videos about astrology because I am an astrologer. However, I feel that these things are also holistic topics that needs to be addressed as well. Because as an astrologer, I have the ability to look into all aspects of your life and tell you everything about you, but you guys know nothing about me. So I go into great detail and great effort to make you guys have a much better understanding of who I am, as well as an individual, as a person as well. And that way we will know each other rather than just me knowing everything about you as well. So again, once again, with that being said, there's no reason to be afraid. The only reason you are afraid is because of the false self, the ego, the false self that you do not know who you truly are is the root cause of your fear of death. But you, as the pure awareness, the pure consciousness, the pure understanding, does not. And with that being said, I am Triple P, and I'm out. Oh.